You're muscling that thing, and most people just get, they get frustrated.
So far you've talked a lot about the front end. I think that's an important aspect because so much of where riders' confidence comes from is the front tire and
Sure.
being able to tell what it's doing and feel grip through that front tire.
Right. Through the handlebar. Absolutely.
When you're working with a rider, you're trying to diagnose issues, what typically tends to be the time when you're like, ooh, this actually, what you're describing actually feels like an issue coming from the rear end of the bike, not the front end of the bike?
Yeah. Usually my first question is, like I said earlier, is does the bike finish a corner? So by finishing corner, like I said, you get on the gas. Does the bike keep going where you want it to go, or does the bike run wide? Generally, if the suspension is too soft on the rear, the bike will squat down like this, which great. It squats down, gives you a lot more traction. You have all the traction in the world. The other problem is it unweights the front end. The front end comes barely off the ground. It's kind of like doing a miniature wheelie. And instead of driving that front tire around the corner, the front tire is just sitting there skipping across the top of the pavement, right? So when I ask these questions, like, well, yeah, it's running wide. Well, then add like 5 rounds of preload to the shock. Let's start there, or add some more compression, something to keep the thing from squatting down so much. And you do this, and they go by, oh my God, my bike's, I never knew it could turn this good, right? It actually is going where I want it to go. A lot of riders just feel, especially street riders, they feel that, well, this is what it does. You bought this bike, however many thousands of dollars you've spent, new or used, this is what it does. Well, no, we can change things. And it doesn't matter that a brand of suspension doesn't have to be an Olus, doesn't have to be K-Tech, doesn't have to be Nitron. I have people ask me that stuff all the time. What should I buy? I'm like, one, what's your budget? And two, where do you live at? Who can help you tune this vehicle, right? Well, I heard K-Tech was the best. Okay, well, sure, anything's tunable, but what's available to you and who's available to you? And I always tell them, well, if it doesn't work out that way, you can always call me. And I think that's why I have a lot of people across the country, because when I have an interview with them or a session, I'm doing the same thing with them versus if I'm sitting right there in the pits with you. The only difference is you have the 3mm Allen and the 14T handle or 8T handle, whatever, making your own adjustments, right? And don't be afraid to write notes. All pro teams do. I always tell people, wait till the end of the day, because you're going to go up in spring, down in spring. You're going to change all these different things, right? But at the end of the day, when you've finally gone the fastest you've ever gone, well, now you run to write down these numbers, and the temperature of the day and all that other stuff, so that when you get back to that track at that time or whatever, it works good. Street bike riding is a little bit different story because there's so many variables, but again, you got to ask yourself, what is it do you want this thing to do? Generally, if you set a bike up for canyons, it'll be great in the canyon, but you'll hate it in the parking lot. You'll hate it driving down the freeway or whatever it may be, because it's like taking a NASCAR or a Formula One car and putting it on the freeway. It just doesn't work because you're not riding the vehicle to its setup.
Yep.
So, but
when you mentioned that issue of does the bike finish a corner? I think even street riders can have that feeling of, does it finish a corner, right? That's not like a trek only thing.
Yeah.
I think about, because you and I have talked about this personally several times about this exact thing. And it feels to me like it's kind of a balance of getting enough load to transfer to the rear so it grips and drives, but not so much so that it squats and kind of like blows through the stroke, and you kind of end up on like a chopper where the front end's really raked out and it doesn't want to steer anymore. But you can go too far, right? You mentioned, hey, if that happens, you add some preload to not just smash through the rear stroke so quickly. But if you get too stiff on the rear, then you're kind of like hiked up on the thing all the time. It never gets load into it. What
Right, or you can
what
overwear the tire.
Yep.
The problem with most street riders is, yeah, you may know the canyon, but you're still not riding as fast as, say, being on the track. And a lot of times they'll kinda creep around the corner and then they hammer the throttle. "Oh, there's the exit. I'm gonna do all this." Well, that rider that is ham-fisted, well, guess what? You're transferring all that energy to just do that. Or you're ham-fisted with the brakes doing this. And that's why you look at like brake master cylinders, like a real racing master cylinder versus a street master cylinder. Street master cylinders are kind of like they're like a built-in ABS. The harder you squeeze, the less leverage it actually gives on the brakes because the manufacturer doesn't want you to lock up that front end. But some people decide, oh, I'm going to do it. And so now they have ABS on the bike, right? Which you don't see any ABS units on any real race bike. So depending how you ride can also affect on how, what the bike is going to do. Generally slower riders, and they hate hearing this, generally slower riders um, need heavier suspension because they're heavier on the brakes because they pro racers ease into the brakes. You look at their graphs, they ease into the brakes, they ease into the throttle, or their electronics are doing this for them. Where a lot of street riders will tend to hammer the brakes. Oh, where am I going? Where am I going? Okay, now I'm going to hammer the throttle. And you're just doing this big seesaw thing. Fast riders, they'll just tap the brake just to get the thing to turn, and they're back on the gas again.
I think it's assumed like, oh, as I get faster and faster as a rider, I'll need stiffer and stiffer springs to deal with how much force I'm putting into the bike. But I think when you and I first started working together, I think you took the springs I had in the bike. I can't remember what it was in the front, and I think you went down to like a 0.85.
Yeah, you had like 9.5 or a 9.5 and a 1.0, I think. And I'm like, no.
And yeah, and I'm without gear, I'm 180 pounds. So I'm not a
Yeah.
little guy. And yeah, we went down to like a 0.85, which is way softer than even factory springs.
Yeah.
And it
Well,
worked great.
stock springs
Yeah.
are 105s,
Yeah.
in that bike. And again, they don't want you to bottom out. So therefore they'll put heavy springs. A normal street bike usually is pretty far on the nose, so it could turn in quickly and be really nimble in the parking lot. But again, as you've noticed on the racetrack, it's a whole different world. Again, I know we're talking mostly street stuff. So even then, when a rider thinks he's riding really, really hard, I still think even those street bike riders that I work with, I still do softer springs. It makes it more compliant and the bike's actually easier to control. It tightens up a corner when you want it to. I mean, just easier to ride. It really is.